The new MacBook Air was announced via newsroom article recently, and here's what I think. Following Marques Brownlee's prediction of a TikTok cycle for the MacBook Air, yes, recently Apple released the M3 MacBook Air in both the 13 and 15-inch sizes. This comes after a year with only a size increase for the M2 Air. It seems that potential design changes might be reserved for the future M4. So what does this refresh mean for the MacBook Air? Well, probably more battery life, more power, and more heat. If you remember, the M2 Air was majorly criticized for its heat issues considering its lack of a cooling fan in its ultra-thin form factor, and that would probably be carried over into the current new MacBook Air. We already know the performance of the M3 chipset when it released with the new MacBook Pros last year. And we'll have to see how this chip performs without a fan, knowing, the whole 3nm chipset and all the heat, all that power. Yeah, Apple's newsroom article on the new MacBook Air is kind of strange. They skip on comparing it to the M2 chip and instead elected to talk more about how much better it is than the M1 and other older Intel Macs. It's funny how they're still making the whole Intel comparison considering it's been a whole 4 years since the transition started. And, I feel like we've matured to a point where comparisons against Intel aren't really necessary anymore. Especially considering how shit. But yeah, other than that, this new MacBook Air carries the same top-notch design and super thin chassis, the same two USB Type-C ports, and the same headphone port and MagSafe. So just recognizable stuff that we already know and love. Prices will start at $1099 for 8 gigs of RAM with an 8-core GPU and a 256GB SSD, which has been majorly criticized by the people for, being a really, really small amount of power. Because once you spec it up to a decently good spec, about 16 gigs of RAM, a 512 SSD, it's a solid $1699, and that is a major step up from the $1099 price tag that it started at. However, the old M2 version has been dropped down to a good $999 for the 8GB 256 model. So that's actually not a bad price for the M2. So the M2 is still a really good computer. But seriously, Apple, 8 gigs? It's time to let it go. 16 gigs at minimum, please. It sounds like a great computer this year. Alright, I'm probably not gonna get my hands on it because I've got other stuff to focus on, currently patching up the room. But yeah, can we just take a moment to rant about the lack of a Mac Mini?